responsibility can be called many, many things. Some people refer to it as shared values. Some people refer to it as corporate citizenship. Others put the moniker, sustainability. Well, the way I view corporate responsibility and the way many others view is doing the right thing as a business, giving back to the communities in which you operate, not taking from the earth and not giving back. And I could go on and on and on. And if we look back at the last 30 years, we've seen some major changes happening in the field of corporate responsibility. What began many, many years ago when CEOs would just write checks to causes that typically he believed in, has now changed to companies galvanizing to be supportive of social issues. Companies completely reconstructing their supply chains to ensure that they are not employing children, so that they are paying equal wages and paying a living wage. And the practice of corporate responsibility is no longer siloed. We are starting to see it being spread throughout the enterprise. And probably most exciting to me, we are seeing CSR being embedded in startups and new entrepreneurships. It is no longer just the purview of the Fortune 500 or the Business Week 2000 or the FTSE 100. It is very much all around us. And that is what I see as a good thing. Looking ahead, where I would like to see it go is to not be something separate. That business just does the right thing because it is not only best for their business, but it's best for their employees, it's best for the communities they operate in, and it drives better returns on investment. Well, you asked the question, why should business care about corporate responsibility? Well, right now there are enormous studies many studies from which you can peruse, showcasing that not only by doing the right thing, your company will attract the best employees. Those employees will stay put and not get up and leave and go to the competition. And those employees will be more productive. So for instance, if the business offers opportunities for your employees to volunteer, studies show that those employees will actually be more productive on the job. You also want to be able to attract the best employees. They are your biggest asset, your most important asset. So why wouldn't you want to be doing what is going to help you to get those millennials to be knocking on your door? And again, studies prove that if you indeed are philanthropic, if you are supportive of social causes, if you are responsible on your environmental production, limiting water usage, as simply as making sure you have LED lighting in your plants and in your offices. Those things are going to help you attract and keep the best employees. We're even seeing the results or the studies that show that consumers are more likely to buy from the companies they perceive to be doing the right thing. So when I speak to a business leader, why wouldn't you go this route? So if you're an entrepreneur and you're just starting a business, what is the case for you to actually make social good part of your business model? I'm asked that question quite often, and I have to say, I immediately turn it back onto the entrepreneur and I say, do you want to hire the best people? Do you want those people to stay put? Do you want your product to be looked at with folks wanting it? These are important questions for you to consider, and if you bake social good in at the beginning, it's going to be a lot easier as you grow. And it doesn't have to be a big monetary expenditure. If you're a small business and you're operating in a local community, it can be as small or little as giving back to a local charity and making sure your employees know about it, and giving your employees the opportunity to perhaps fundraise for that cause, volunteer for that cause, or get their kids involved in volunteering for that cause. That is not a huge investment on your part, but your employees and your customers will take notice. So instead of waiting until you are a cruise ship and you're right now a rowboat, it's a lot easier to turn a rowboat around than it is to turn a cruise ship. What can consumers do to maybe put pressure on companies, small and large, to be more sustainable or doing the right thing? Well, you have the power in your purse, in your pocketbook, in your wallet to push those changes along every day of the year. There's lots and lots of indexes out there. For instance, there's one called the Buy-Up Index, which actually shows, it allows you to check which companies are actually placing women at the senior parts of companies. How many women do they have on their boards? So if inclusion and diversity are important to you as a consumer, you can go ahead and be spending money on those companies that are actually being mindful about inclusion. You also can easily look online and find companies that are being environmentally conscious, being socially conscious, being philanthropically minded, and I encourage folks to do that because you don't even realize how much power you have as a consumer. That dollar means a lot to all kinds of businesses, whether they are airline companies, travel and hospitality, automobile companies, to every kind of retailer. There's a conversation going on about slow fashion, affordability, fast fashion, and as someone that came from nominal means, I was always looking for a deal in my 20s and 30s. Now I have a little bit more leeway, but I'm still a very conscious shopper when it comes to pricing. I'd rather spend my money on holidays and travel than new clothes. But one of the things that I've learned is sometimes it's better to spend a little bit more to have something that is going to last throughout the season or maybe even into next season and not start to self-combust. So not to put down the fast fashion merchandisers that are out there, but I do think there's something to be said by buying a few things that may cost a little bit more, but something that you will covet for many years to come, or at least a couple of years. So that would be my kind of first suggestion. The second is, I have to say, there are typical or traditional fast fashion companies that are starting to be much more conscious in their designs, in their materials, in their supply chains, and two come to mind. One is H&M, which I'm sure many of those that follow this network purchase from, and another is Ann Inc. Both are doing great deals of work to, I hate to use the term, clean up their supply chain, but really be rigorous in the suppliers that they are working for. So I think going forward, you're going to see a lot of changes, but I also think, it may be worth spending just a little bit more to get those products that, won't start to self-combust or self-destruct as you walk out the door. I have so many women I could name that inspire me. It's kind of a morning ritual of mine every weekday to read the broadsheet, which is put out by Fortune, where I sit there and I'm just enamored by people that I don't know who are doing incredibly good things, both from running their businesses or being senior at particular corporations. But several women come to mind. One would be a beautifully, lovely, wonderful person who's been a dear friend for many years named Lisa Witter. Lisa Witter has been a social activist, a business leader, and she lives now in Berlin with her husband and two little boys, and co-founded an incredibly smart business called Apolitical, which is one of the first communities for civil servants. We lack in this world a place where those who work in public service or work for governments can go and be inspired. We tend to see all those tools for business leaders, even NGO leaders, but what about those people who toil in government offices, which do really important work for all of us, like make sure our snow is plowed and make sure our water is clean. But this new community platform called Apolitical is going to inspire and spark innovation from civil servants all over the world. Another would be Diana Verde Nieto. Diana runs an incredibly innovative startup that she founded about 5 years ago called Positive Luxury. And what Positive Luxury does is it shines a light on luxury brands that are pushing the envelope to be more sustainable, to be more philanthropic. And instead of tisking them, if that makes sense, or shaming them, it is very much about shining a light on the ones doing the good thing so that it will inspire other brands to get on the bandwagon. When they see that halo placed on a particular, whether it's a hospitality company or a clothing brand or a luxury watch designer, for the good work that those brands are doing, other brands will say, hey, I want to join this. And another woman runs the incredible foundation called the Harnish Foundation. Ruth Ann Harnish was a broadcast journalist for many years, back when there were very few women holding the anchor chair on television news. And she toiled in an industry that was very, very male-dominated in the 70s, 80s, and she rose to the very, very senior ranks in that world. And now she is a philanthropist. And one of the main focuses of the Harnish Foundation is to shine lights and give and get more voices in the media so that it isn't all just white males over the age of 45. And it is minorities, and it is transgender, and it is LGBT, and it is women, and it is women of color and men of color. And I see how important those issues are, and given the world that she came from, she has a real credible voice. And I could just go on and on and on. There are so many inspiring women out there. From a startup visibility perspective or startup strengths, I would have to say Soraya Darabi and Maxine Bada, who founded Zaidi. The wonderful Kelly Khalil, who founded the just amazing wedding resource called Loverly. Kara Golden, who founded Hint Water, which is scrumptious and delicious, and Rachel Sklar and Glynis McNichol, who founded The List. Those are just a number of other remarkable superstars that I just hat tip and bow my head to for the incredible work that they've done. So what kind of advice would I offer female founders? Probably the same advice I would offer any female that is coming of age and looking to excel professionally. Build your confidence. I'll say that again, build your confidence. And also know that everyone else is terrified. You are not the only one. It was funny, I used to train folks how to network. And I would always say that when you walk up and talk to someone at a conference or a dinner or an event, they are so relieved because they are terrified to go get up and talk to someone else. And if you do it, you become the better half, so to speak. Believe me, there is a collective sigh of relief when someone comes up to talk to you because you're not alone anymore. So never be that person that is afraid to not say hello, shake someone else's hand, and smile. I realize that I'm making fun of something that can be scary, but if you know that everyone else is terrified, somehow that takes the fear out of it. Secondly, we live in a world today where you have instant access to anyone. Now, I grew up in a time where there were gatekeepers and secretaries and yellow pages where you had to look up phone numbers and not even be able to Google or look online to find the name of a person in a particular department. It was impossible to find anyone. It literally would take days to get to the right person, this was before email, but to the right phone number and then get through the gatekeepers. Well, now, between Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and whatever else is coming down the pike, you have incredible instant access. You can even tweet right to the President of the United States. So I would say get on all these platforms. Don't be afraid of any of them. The worst thing that can happen is the person doesn't respond. That is the absolute worst thing that can happen. But don't not try. And Smile more than you frown. Somebody told me a long time ago that it actually burns more calories to smile and to be kind. And somehow over 20, 25 years, I've somehow maintained my weight. And I do credit a lot of that with smiling. It may sound silly, but it works. So that is some of my just elementary advice. So when thinking about how founders can communicate on behalf of their brand, showcase their brand, you've got to get pretty out there and use all the tools that are at your disposal. But I think before you do that, you really need to kind of self-reflect and find out how you best can be articulating what your brand stands for. It's really easy. Let's say you are an artist that has created a line of shoes, okay, and you want to go ahead and showcase those shoes. Well, let's think back about how do those shoes make you feel? How do those shoes make your customer feel? What is the feeling that those shoes evoke? And perhaps if you are employing some sort of give back or philanthropic program, this is an opportune time for you to be able to articulate that as well. Whether it's a percentage of proceeds from the sale of those shoes go to a particular cause that you are passionate about, or if, for instance, there is a cause marketing campaign that when people go ahead and pay for the shoes, they can add an additional dollar to be able to fund, whether it's the American Heart Association or Breast Cancer Research Foundation or what have you. These are opportunities for you then to be able to evoke a feeling around the particular brand. And once you're able to articulate that, then you can go to all the tools that are at our disposal, whether it be video interviews with bSMART, to platforms such as the usual Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, but things like Medium. You could be writing pieces on behalf of your organization or your company, as well as the causes you support. You can be using videos, you can be using photos, Twitter chats. I'm a big believer in Twitter chats to be building engagement, to be building followers, to be building friends. I've been to 3 weddings of people I met on Twitter, just a side note. So there are so many ways for you to be articulating your brand. And I will say one other thing. If you're not an extrovert, if you're not comfortable in front of the camera, don't stress, because maybe there's someone on your team that you could anoint or place that responsibility to. And that doesn't mean you're kind of giving up your role. It just means that perhaps your expertise lies elsewhere in the organization. Part of being a leader, part of being a successful founder is understanding where your strengths are and then galvanizing a particular team member who might be able to rise to the occasion and take on that task. What does it take to build a successful partnership or collaboration? A lot. I hate to say it, but a partnership can be very much like a marriage. And it takes 2 to tango, and it takes 2 to fall apart. What I have seen over the years, and mainly working around public-private partnerships, partnerships between NGOs and corporations that have come together to affect positive change in the world, which is all well and good. But if the rules of engagement aren't set from the start, if both players or several players don't come in and realize they are all equally important in the end goal, and that each has an individual who is assigned to run the relationship from each of the organizations, the actual partnership will deteriorate. Plans must be set. You must have milestones throughout the course of the relationship engagement. So let's say it's a year partnership or a 2-year partnership. There are meetings set every other week with reporting. And by doing that, you are able to pivot or make changes along the way as things do change inevitably. People leave, people go, organizations change. And if you don't have those milestones and meeting points set in advance, believe me, you'll let them slide. And we all know if you don't communicate on a regular basis with your spouse or your partner, things aren't as good. So I do recommend that you have just a roadmap ahead. What are the success metrics you're going to be using? And know in the beginning when you look to the end, so if you know this is a 2-year engagement, what at the end of the 2 years is going to tell you that this partnership was a success? And use that as the goalpost, the basketball hoop or whatever, but the end goal, and work backwards from there. When I look back and I think to my kind of founding years, I am thankful for some really important words of wisdom that were passed on to me from both my late mother and my late father. My mom was I was one of the original latchkey kids, meaning my mom went back to school when I was 6. And I would come home from school in the 70s with a key around my neck, and I very much remember feeling very frustrated because all my friends' moms were home. And I didn't really appreciate the amazing work that she had done. She worked for PBS in public relations, so the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But it wasn't until I was in high school and I got to see her traveling all over the country and speaking at events that, wow, she was a rock star. Well, she taught me early on the ridiculous statement, don't burn your bridges, which I have taken to heart my entire life. Now, I lost her in a tragedy when I was 21, so maybe it's even more cemented in me, but she also taught me empathy and compassion, and she always said, regardless whatever happens, be good, be caring, and give back. And again, I may probably live that to the nth degree because of the nature of her death. My father, on the other hand, was a history professor who taught at a women's college for 39 years. And he was one, I mean, he had, I'm making them sound like saints, and of course they're human like everyone else, or they were human like everyone else was, with warts and everything else. Well, not really warts, but my father had tremendous integrity. And I remember early on as a child when I wanted to stay home from school, and I was like, Mom, Dad, can't you just call me in sick? My father would say to me, Susan, if you want to stay home from school, totally fine, but you need to call in and tell your teacher that you don't want to be there today. Because they didn't ever want to lie or to tell mistruths. So, integrity was drilled in from very early memory. And then after my mother was killed, my father, who was a history professor and knew nothing about the business world, like could not zip, nothing, would try so hard. And I remember when I was trying to determine whether I should move from Washington, D.C. to Southern California. I was working for USA Today at the time in the 80s, and they wanted to transfer me out there. I knew no one in Los Angeles, absolutely no one. I was, I think, 23, 24 at the time, and I was terrified. And my father said, Susan, nothing is a prison sentence. Meaning, if I wanted to come back, if I wanted to pivot, I could. And I got on a plane, and I moved my entire life to the West Coast and started over. And I was terrified. But I just remember telling myself, I'm not stuck. I can always get back on a plane and return, and life will go on. And those kind of two frames really shaped who I am today, and probably explains why I run a business that is all about social good and making the world a better place. So my advice to people who are to the men and women that are watching this video or trying to kind of figure out some roadmaps or advice to use to get them motivated to move forward, etc. Nothing's a prison sentence. Be good, be empathetic, be compassionate, and back to that smile and give someone a hug today, because you never know when you're going to not see them again.